Today we get to check out a watch that combines one of my favorite micro brands with one of my favorite types of watches. The micro brand is Wise Watches out of Thailand, and the watch is their take on a modern Type B Flieger dial watch. Take a look and then we'll get into it. Hey guys, this is Dave. Welcome back to my channel, Just the Watch, where I like to talk all about affordable watches and affordable watch collecting. And as always, I am filming this from my home in Iwate, Japan. Now, I've reviewed a lot of watches from Wise, and I have been consistently impressed with the level of quality that they put out. I would look at them as kind of a premium, affordable micro brand, so they're not creeping up into those expensive micro brand categories. Their prices typically range from around $400 to around $900, with the Flyboy, which we're looking at today, coming in at $550. But every single watch that I've reviewed for them, I have felt is actually a very good value for the level of quality that they offer. I always feel like when you get a watch from Wise, you're spending a little bit more money, but getting a lot more watch than you would get from a comparable micro brand that offers similar specs and movements. Now, I'm also a big fan of the Type B Flieger style watches. These are watches that are based on German military watches going all the way back to World War II, and yet this is a modernized, updated version of it that I think makes for a really interesting package. Now, this watch was given to me for free by Wise to facilitate the purposes of this review. However, on the watch itself, I was not provided any additional compensation, nor did Wise have any control over the content of this review. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the watch. The Wise Flyboy is a modern take on the classic Type B Flieger watch. It retains the classic Flieger layout on the dial, but in place of simple printed markings against a matte background, you're getting a much more intricately crafted dial. The dimensions have been shrunk down to a much more wrist-friendly 39mm diameter in place of the oversized original Flieger watches, and rather than a simple utilitarian case, we have a beautifully finished 904L stainless steel case with alternating brushing and polished surfaces. And the end result of all this is a watch that clearly retains the spirit of those original Type B Flieger watches, but with everything reworked to give it something like a luxury makeover. I just reviewed a pair of watches from Loco, which is one of the original Flieger manufacturers in Germany. Those watches went a long way to reproduce the look and feel of those original vintage watches. Here, Wise is taking a different approach using higher quality materials, movements, and finishing. And it's interesting because this watch from Wise is priced at basically the same as the watch from Loco. But when you look at its technical specifications in terms of water resistance, the power of the loom, and the movement inside of it, as well as the quality of the steel used in the case, this watch from Wise is clearly superior. But on the other hand, the heritage and that classic retro design coming out of Loco is something that is undeniably appealing. When I released that last video, a lot of people were complaining about the lower specifications, so I think this is an excellent alternative if you are more specs focused rather than design and heritage focused. So let's start by going over the technical aspects of this watch, and then we'll wrap back around to the design. And we have to start with the dial of this watch because this is a very intricate dial, which is something that you don't often see on a Type B Flieger. The original Type B Fliegers were created to be highly legible watches, and as such, they featured simple printed high contrast dials. The Type B layout is one of my favorite watch layouts, both for its legibility and its level of interest and complication. It's a very busy dial layout, but once you understand how it works, it makes for very rapid reading of the time, and it's very intuitive. It has prominent minute markers going around the outer edge of the dial in 5-minute increments, with the more traditional 12-hour markings in a printed ring on the intersection of the dial. And the reason this makes for such an incredibly legible layout is because the minute hand will stretch out and hit those minute markers on the outer portion, and the shorter hour hand will hit the hours on the inner portion. Which means that when your eye is drawn to the hour hand, you'll see the inner hour track, and when it's drawn to the minute hand, you'll see that outer minute track, making for a reading experience that is in some ways similar to using a digital watch where you have both the hours and minutes displayed on the watch. On this version from Wise, rather than simply printing everything on the dial like you typically see, you're actually getting a multi-layer dial with multiple finishes on it. The inner part of the dial where the hour markers are housed is in a recessed portion that features a brushed finish, while there's a slightly elevated ring around the outside where the minute markings are housed, and in that outer ring you're getting a grainy sand-like textured finish. And at the very edge of the dial you're getting a detailed railroad second track. Paired up with this layout is a perfectly proportioned handset that features an hour, minute, and second hand that all hit exactly where they need to perfectly line up with their respective markings. And I really like the handset that they've gone with here. It kind of looks like a sword-shaped handset with the tips cut off and flattened. It has a very simple and pure geometric look to it, while still coming across as unique. Now there's a number of different colorways available. I went with a fairly muted gray dial. This is a very monochrome design that also features a matching gray leather strap, but the Arrowhead second hand features a nice pop of orange color that sort of livens things up a little bit. Overall, the dial and handset look pretty nice in the daylight, but when you turn the lights off, that's when things really get impressive. Because again, this is a watch from Wise, and they have consistently dominated my lume rankings with every watch that they've sent over. Now, I was a little curious because the other watches from Wise that I have tested have been things like a full lume dial or dive watches that feature large lume plots on the dial. But it's much more difficult to lume printed Arabic numerals. So I wasn't sure if it was even possible for them to lume this as brightly as they've done on their other watches, but they basically did. This hit an insane 21 on my lume score, which makes it the 4th brightest watch that I've ever tested. The top 3 are also from Wise. I've measured the lume on nearly 100 watches using this point system, and Wise is the only brand that has been able to put out watches that score 20 or above. And that puts them really in a league of their own in terms of lume performance. But turning the lights back on, there's one more thing we need to appreciate. This watch also features a 904L stainless steel case, which is something that Wise has done on many of their watches and is very unique to see on watches in this price range. 904L stainless steel is basically a higher grade of stainless steel than the typical 316L that's used on most microbrand watches, or most good affordable watches for that matter. But 904L stainless steel, this is the kind of stuff that you see in luxury watches. Most famously, this is the type of steel that is used by Rolex in their Oyster steel. It has a higher level of corrosion resistance, which is always great. But for a luxurious pilot's watch like this, the thing that's really important is the extra level of shine that 904L is able to take when you polish it up. And Wise does a beautiful job of finishing their watches. This one is no exception. There are many polished accents on this watch, even though it does feature primarily brushed surfaces. The brushing is excellently applied, and it really allows for those polished bevels and edges to really shine and sparkle, making this a really beautiful watch. Additionally, this case does feature 100 meters of water resistance and a screw-down crown, making this not only a beautiful pilot's watch, but also a very rugged and capable one as well. As long as you swapped out the leather strap for something waterproof, you could easily take this watch swimming or snorkeling or even water skiing. And that's not difficult because this watch features very friendly 20mm lugs, so there's a lot of options there, and the strap does feature quick-release spring bars. Overall, it's a very nice-looking strap, very comfortable on the wrist, and the color of the strap pairs great with the dial of the watch. Another thing that I really appreciate about this watch is how slim it is. It's only 11mm thick, and that's including the domed sapphire crystal. Now, the thing that makes that slimness possible is the movement inside of this watch, which is a Miyota 9000 series no-date movement. This is a premium Japanese movement that Miyota built to compete with Swiss watch movements. It features a high level of accuracy, a smooth 28,800 beats per hour beat rate, and a slim design that allows for watches to be made extremely thin and comfortable on the wrist. Now, the proportions of this watch, along with the beautiful finishing and the intricacies of the dial, really open up the possibility of this being a watch that could be used in both formal and casual situations if it weren't for the very militaristic font that's used on the dial. And that font that's used on the minute and hour markings of this watch is probably the one thing that I'm not totally thrilled about here. To me, it looks like this font was clearly chosen to give this watch sort of a military vibe. But given that this is already a Type B Flieger, a font is not needed to give this watch a military vibe. The real military Type B Fliegers feature very simple text, a font that is extremely legible and easy to read, whereas the numerals on the Wise Flyboy are slightly stylized. And to me, that just kind of signals that this watch seems like it's trying too hard. Like it wasn't confident enough to be a military watch on its own. It needed this sort of really masculine font to compensate for something. But the reality is, everything about this watch is so well done, it doesn't need a militaristic font face to compensate for anything. This is a very well built, very sturdy, very well spec'd, very well designed watch, and I just wish they would have kept things simple when it came to the font that they chose to use on the dial. Now that said, fonts are extremely subjective, and if you do like this font, this is pretty much a perfect watch. The only technical complaint I would have about this watch is that brushed inner portion of the dial can be a bit difficult to read when the light hits it at certain angles. That portion of the dial can catch the light and get blown out. It's not often that it happens, but given that the intent of the original Type B Fliegers was to be primarily a legible watch, you might find it a little bit annoying that some of the legibility was sacrificed for the sake of style. But this is a more stylized, kind of flashy take on that classic watch. And given that I think that's the design philosophy that they were going for here, I think it makes sense, and I think it still fits with what they were trying to do. And again, it's only at certain angles that you'll see this actually happen. All in all, this is yet another highly competent watch from Wise, and something you should definitely consider if you're looking for a modern, high-quality pilot's watch. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up the review for today. Drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you think of this watch and Wise watches in general. Always love to hear from you guys. If you're interested in purchasing the watch, there's a link to Wise's website in the description. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, want to purchase a t-shirt, you can get one like this over at justthewatch.com. That'll wrap it up for today. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you later.